There's an MVP debate percolating in the National Basketball Association. We'll talk about that. Plus, Trevor Lawrence, the #1 overall pick. Everybody knows that. So why would he be an interesting topic of discussion today? I'll let you know why in a few with my boy Max and Molly, of course. First Takes in the house. It's Friday, y'all. Let's get it.
Good day. Welcome into First Take on a Feel-Good Friday. Thank you for sort of starting your weekend here with us. Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, I'm Molly Karam Rose. And gentlemen, the MVP race, it's a fluid situation like a Stephen A's list. Joel Embiid sat down with Stephen A. Stephen A., I understand that interview will air in its entirety on Monday, correct? SportsCenter with Stephen A. at 7 p.m. Eastern?
A part of it will air on SportsCenter with Stephen A. Monday night, and then the interview in its entirety will air on Stephen A.'s World the following day.
Can't wait.
Okay.
Let's go.
Awesome. And then we also have Damian Lillard making his case. He joined Jalen and Jacoby. So let's hear from both of them right now.
When Shaq won his MVPs, averaging 29.7 and 13 boards. I'm up there when it comes to stats, and also being the best team in the East. What more can you ask? And you look at the last two MVPs, same thing, Giannis. I mean, those were his numbers, and he had the best record in the East.
I feel like I'm really in the mix for it. When you consider how people are defended, when I watch a lot of NBA games, and I just feel like the people who would, have a vote for MVP or talk about who's the MVP and who's not, I don't feel like everybody really watched these games, because if they did, they would see how I'm being face guarded full court and double teamed near half court and trapped. What does an MVP look like? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you making the case off of? Because a lot of people, like I said, are just not being defended the way I'm being defended. And I think I have a stronger case this year than I ever have, and I think I'm deserving of it. That's just the truth.
All right, y'all. Max, I'm going to start with you. Dame time or your guy, Joel Embiid? I know you originally had him. Who do you think's making the stronger case for MVP at this moment?
Damian Lillard. And Jokic would be my pick for MVP by a hair over Lillard, because in the last couple weeks, games that were not understandable given the load he's had to carry this season. Look, Embiid game for game, I'm not arguing. He was my MVP, as you remember, Stephen A., to start the season right up until he got hurt. Missed a little too much time. Even at that point, he had missed some games, but I was like, he's playing so much better than everyone else. That included LeBron, by the way. I thought he was clearly the best in the league. I'd have given him the MVP. Also carrying team and all that stuff, missed too much time. You know who hasn't missed time? Damian Lillard. You know who didn't have a team around him, but was carrying his team to a good record anyway and winning games with enormous? Damian Lillard. Stephen A., it was you who set up on this show, what was that, maybe not even a month ago, something like that, talking about you needed to apologize to Damian Lillard because we have not paid enough attention to him. Now, partly that's because he doesn't play in a glamour market. Partly that's because it's the West Coast and the games are on late. Partly it's because he resembles another guard that we've seen who's done amazing things, Steph Curry. I get, and Steph has already done that, right? That's all true. But Damian Lillard, just forget about the fact that he carries his team, that he doesn't chase rings, that he stayed right where he was, that he's the leader that he is. When you put up numbers just about as good as anyone's, when you don't miss any time, when you lead your team in spite of injuries all around you, no one there to help you, and you are, no one disputes this, by the way, the most clutch player in the game since he's come in the league. Not only do our eyeballs say that, and by reputation we believe it, all the numbers say it. You're also the most clutch guy? No. Damian Lillard right now is neck and neck with Jokic for MVP ahead of Embiid.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that because I definitely think, as I pointed out, a few weeks ago, it's time that we give Damian Lillard his props. This dude is playing sensational basketball throughout this season. To do so without C.J. McCollum, without Nurkic for a vast majority of those times, inserting new guys like Covington and others into the mix. Damian Lillard deserves all the credit in the world. Here's where the problem lies. And Joel Embiid brought this up. Number one, as it pertains to Joel Embiid, they're number one in the Eastern Conference. They've got the best record in the Eastern Conference and one of the best records in basketball, and that has to count for something. Now, they've been like 8-6 this year without Joel Embiid, and I think they went like 7-2 or 8-1 in a 9-game stretch or so that he was out over a couple of weeks or so because of that knee injury. But the bottom line is that nobody can deny that he's been absolutely positively dominant in the 5 games that he's played pretty much since his return. Other than a 14-point game, he had 35, 36, 39, 38, if I remember correctly. He's been pretty much unstoppable and on both ends of the floor, and the Sixers are the number 1 seed. So that's an argument that you would make in favor of Embiid, even though he's played 15 less games. In the case of the Joker, Nikola Jokic, that is where it gets really, really interesting and dicing for Damian Lillard as it pertains to his aspirations. You're talking about a guy in Jokic that's averaging 26, 11, and 8, nearly 9 assists per game. You're talking about a guy that's playing for the Denver Nuggets that's the number 4 seed in the Western Conference, 3.5 games better than the 6-seeded Portland Trailblazers. And he's clearly the face of that franchise, and he's clearly the leader of that franchise in terms of who's the go-to man, who's the franchise player for them, even though we all love Jamal Murray and definitely hope he gets better after suffering his torn ACL the other night. But you look at Jokic, and there is just no question what he brings to the table as well. So if you're Damian Lillard and you have to contend with Jokic out west, who's got a better record, he's 3.5 games better, he hasn't missed a single game, pretty much just he's been just as available as you have been. The one argument that you can make in Damian Lillard's favor is the fact that C.J. McCollum missed so many games along with Nurkic. That's the best argument you can make outside of the fact that he's clutch as well. He's the best clutch player in basketball. One could easily argue with Damian Lillard and what he's been able to do since 2012. But on one hand, again, it's Embiid winning, number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and in the West, you've got an MVP candidate that has a better record and has been just as reliable as you have been in terms of games being played while he's doing that. That's where Damian Lillard runs into a roadblock. But it's an interesting and compelling argument to make for everybody.
Look, I'll say this about Embiid. Embiid, it was on Basketball Reference today. There are certain offensive ratings, defensive ratings, and usage rate. Right now, if the season ended now, he would have a combination of those numbers that no one's ever had. The other guys on the list are Michael Jordan appears on the list 3 times, and someone else amazing appears on the list. I'll tell you right now, and Kevin Durant appears on that list once. Pretty good company, right? And who knows if he ends the season like that. But game for game, Embiid has been the best player in basketball. His main competition comes from James Harden, because Harden's had an amazing impact this season. Both of them have missed too much. I'm going to take them off. You can't miss 19 games and win the MVP when there are this many great players in the league. So I'm taking them off the list. You make a very good case for Jokic, and in fact, I agree with you. I would give it to Jokic by a hair, because as I said, there were a couple games in recent weeks where Lillard fell off his incredibly high standards. And it's understandable because he's exhausted, right? He's had to carry the load. Let's see what Jokic does now without Jamal Murray the rest of the way, because that's what Lillard's been dealing with more than that. No, you mentioned it, no McCollum, no Nurkic. And anyway, his team isn't as good as Jokic's, and it's not just because you may think Jokic is better than Lillard. So Lillard's been having to carry this enormous load the entire time, and as a result of that, I think he deserves extra credit. I still have Jokic ahead of him by a hair. I think it's Jokic and Lillard. It's a 2-horse race as we come down the stretch.
Well, again, but what if Embiid continues to do what he's been doing and doesn't miss any more games? I think it was the 77-78 season, if I remember correctly, when Bill Walton won the MVP, and he had missed 24 games that season. I mean, the situation is that, again, some of us are going to count games missed against Joel Embiid. Some may not, if that's all the games that he's missed, and he remains as dominant as he has been, and the Philadelphia 76ers end up being the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. These are the kind of things that Damian Lillard has to pay attention to. And he's absolutely right in terms of people watching games. Some people don't watch games at all. I'm certainly not one of those people, but in the same breath, in defense of a lot of voters, yeah, you're going to watch the games, but guess what? You can't watch every single game. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're going to sit up there and you're going to watch the fourth quarter in one game, the first half in another game. You're going to go back and forth, watching these games and paying attention. You're going to read articles. You're going to look at numbers and stats and things of that nature. So he's absolutely right in terms of people not being able to watch games start to finish. But it doesn't mean we're blind. We know that C.J. McCollum was out. We know that Nurkic is out. We know what Damian Lillard has had to deal with. And even though I think that Terry Stotts, knows what he's doing as a coach, in the same breath, there's been no changes. You pretty much know what's coming with the Portland Trailblazers night in and night out. There's never been any tweaks that we have seen in regards to his coaching. So that's another thing I think is working against Damian Lillard. And then, of course, the power in the Western Conference. But just like the power in the Western Conference should be taken into consideration for him, it's got to be taken into consideration for Jokic. And that's where, again, it's a challenge. But Damian Lillard could still win the award the way that he's been balling throughout the season. It's about the stretch run, and that's what it comes down to. I don't rule out any of the three. And, oh, by the way, if Harden comes back sooner than later, I'm not ruling him out either, because it can't happen when you consider what he was doing on the basketball court.
Fluid situation. I told you to start the segment. Guys, I thought this was a pretty interesting note. The only players with more points and assists through 9 seasons than Damian Lillard, that would be LeBron James and Oscar Robertson. Pretty good company to be in. Maybe people need to watch the games.
Those are big
We'll keep
dudes.
it going. Steph Curry with the shot. Cooking it up again. Scores 30 again, fellas. 33 points Thursday night in a victory at Cleveland. Steph has a chance to tie Kobe on this list in the Warriors' next game, which is 8:30 p.m. Eastern Saturday at Boston on ABC for most consecutive 30-point games over the age of 33. Stephen A., is Steph Curry the best guard in the NBA?
I got to tell you this. If the Golden State Warriors were winning basketball games, he would definitely be in this MVP conversation, because he's the greatest shooter we've ever seen. And that's when, whenever I speak to any guards in the NBA, that's what I talk about when I talk about Steph Curry. You want to talk about him being the best guard in the NBA? Obviously, you got to take defense into consideration, and nobody is going to accuse Steph Curry of being a stout or an outstanding defender. We're not going to go that far. From the offensive standpoint, I will tell you this. There is not a guard in the NBA that I would rather have than Steph Curry. And that includes Damian Lillard. And I love me some Damian Lillard. But Steph Curry is the greatest shooter I've ever seen in my life. And you literally have to pick him up from half court. As a result, it stretches out defenses and opens the floor for Golden State's offense because of what Steph Curry brings to the table. And the fact that he's been able to do what he has been doing without the services of Klay Thompson really, really cements his greatness as far as I'm concerned. And then we look at it right now. What is the dude averaging? He's averaging 30.7 points per game on 48.9% shooting from the field, 42.2% from three-point range. Steph Curry, this is who we're talking about here. He's a career 43.4% shooter from three-point range. He's the greatest shooter God ever created. I don't care what anybody says. I've never seen anybody like him. Spot-up shooters, you're right, jump shooters, dudes that are on the move, dudes that are standing still. None of them can do it all like Steph Curry can do in terms of creating his own jump shot. I've never seen it in my life. And because of that is why I'd say he's the best guard, because people can't do what he can do. No matter if they can score 30, they can average 30, 35 or whatever. They can't spread the floor and open the offense the way that he can outside of maybe Damian Lillard. He's the only one in the conversation. But I still wouldn't put him ahead of Steph Curry as a shooter. And because that's the reality of the situation, I would tell you that Steph Curry's the best guard. But he's certainly not a leading candidate for MVP because Golden State is not winning enough games.
If he was the best guard, they'd be winning more games, because Damian Lillard's team was winning games even when he was the only dude on the team. They were winning, Stephen A.
And when you say he was never the only dude on the team. You see Portland's roster compared to Golden State's?
Well, Golden State, Wiseman wound up getting hurt, and he's young, but he's athletic. Draymond Green. It's not like they had nobody. In fact, they put the Oubre and guys that they picked up. I was the one saying I didn't think they had enough shooting. You and I debated this. I didn't think to start the season they had enough shooting. But his team is not winning as much as Lillard's. Now, I'll say this. What am I going to sit here and pretend Damian Lillard's way better than Steph Curry? Of course not. It's close. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, Stephen A. I don't think anyone disputes that for the reasons you point out. It's not just that he can shoot in a variety of spot up. He can get his off the dribble, whatever you want him to do from a million miles away. He's the greatest shooter ever. Until it matters most. He had a great series, especially when it mattered most, in that final series against Toronto. Until then, I did not consider him a great shooter in the finals when it mattered most. We haven't seen Damian Lillard in that situation yet, but as we said, he's the most clutch player in the NBA. Undisputed, by the way. No one really disputes it. Health. No one really disputes it, and that's with eyeballs and stats, right? That's Lillard. So if it's close in a lot of respects, and one dude's that much more clutch, and one dude's team is winning more, though they fill similar roles, I find it hard to argue Steph over Damian Lillard at this moment. Now, what about James Harden this year? I'm not going to say he's ahead in the MVP race because he missed so much time. But when he was on the court, I thought he was a more effective guard than Steph Curry. I'm not slighting Steph. Steph is a miraculous player. But Harden was controlling the game from the point guard position, unlike almost anyone has ever controlled the game this year. I mean, he's had MVP seasons and caliber seasons in the past, Stephen A., but I've never seen him play like he was playing this year. By the way, no KD, sometimes no Kyrie, still beating all kinds of teams. I think that you have to put this season Harden ahead of Steph. I would put this season close, but Damian Lillard ahead of Steph. And that's to say nothing of point forwards. You know, they're not little like Steph, but they basically fulfill the same responsibilities in the offense. Like, who's the greatest point guard of all time, really? LeBron James, if you consider him a point guard, which he kind of is nowadays. What's Luka Doncic nowadays? Sort of a point guard. You want to call him a point forward, okay. But it's not a point forward like Anthony Mason or Scottie Pippen were once point forwards. It's a different kind of animal. So I put those guys ahead of Steph too, let alone Lillard and Harden this season.
Well, first of all, the question wasn't who's having the best season. Because if I'm looking at the best season, I'm not going to just look at numbers. I'm going to look at effectiveness. I'm going to look at what you're working with, what you're working against, et cetera, et cetera. James Harden had at least Kyrie on the court or KD. Certainly not both of them, but he had one of them. That's number one. When you look at Damian Lillard, Robert Covington is no scrub. Enes Kanter is no scrub. Gary Trent Jr. was no scrub before he was traded. Obviously, Carmelo Anthony is there. So when you look at some of the pieces that he had in place, compared to what Steph Curry had in place, I'd say they're a little bit better than what Steph Curry was working with on the offensive side of the ball in Golden State this year. But I'm not talking about who's having the best season because, again, I think that when you look at Damian Lillard, you look at the James Harden, those guys, they were MVP candidates. You're not going to call Steph Curry that when they've been up and down in Golden State all season long. And Klay Thompson is chewing them out because they lose in a game to Toronto by 60. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. But when you look in overall the general question about the best guard in the NBA, I'm the one that brought up the discussion is that, listen, Irvin Magic Johnson by far is considered the greatest point guard to have ever played the game. People like Michael Jordan and others have Magic Johnson number one, Isaiah Thomas number two. And I'm the one that brought up, when are we going to put Steph Curry into the conversation? Because of the different dynamic he brings to the equation as a point guard, not just with his shooting ability, with the dribble or off the dribble, standing still on the move or whatever. It's his movement without the basketball. It's the fact that he creates havoc because everybody and their mother knows you can't leave him open for a second or it's a three-point shot. So I look at it from that perspective, and that's when I'm answering the question overall in general.
Hold up. You and I are going to have to debate this coming up. I know you said it was the day I wasn't here. I just gotten the COVID vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. I lost my voice as a side effect the next day, so I wasn't here. I think that was Tuesday, right? Stephen A., when Magic Johnson, who was a 19-year-old rookie, he'd turned 20 by the finals, was in the finals against Darryl Dawkins and the Sixers. He jumped at center because Kareem wasn't there as a 20-year-old who entered the season 19 as a rookie. And gave him, what was it, 42, 15, and 8, something like that?
42-15.
42-15 as a rookie and won the championship. And that was the deciding game, right? Like, okay, Steph Curry was the captain of the greatest half-court offense of all time. And in Game 7 at home, for the greatest season ever on the line, 73 wins, his offense couldn't score a single point in the last 4 minutes and 22 seconds. That is blasphemy to compare Steph Curry favorably to Magic Johnson as the greatest point guard of all time.
Yes, I am comparing it because I think that they bring two different things to the game. It's all a matter of what your preference is in terms of what you would prefer and what you think ultimately facilitates an offense. And I know what Magic Johnson did, and I know how phenomenal Magic Johnson is. He's a 5-time champion and arguably the greatest leader we've ever seen. But when you look at what Steph Curry can do with shooting the basketball and the havoc that causes, I can't ignore that.
Strong debate. We got to have it another day, fellas, because we got much more to come here on First Take already planned. The projected number 1 pick, Trevor Lawrence, with some interesting comments. His father chiming in as well. Should the Jaguars be concerned? We got all that for you coming up. Plus, will the Patriots straight up to get a quarterback? You'll hear from Bill Belichick on his quarterback situation. And you know Max and Stephen A. want to react. First Take just getting started.